So thank you, George, for joining us today. How are you doing this morning?
Good, thank you.
George, to start off, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us what you do and your interest around TPA issues?
Uh, Great, thanks. My name is Jorge Florez, and I am a senior program manager leading projects related to the use of data at Global Integrity. My main focus or my main interest in work is working with others to bring about change in how government works and how they deliver services and guarantee the rights of citizens. And well, I got to this through a really continued but kind of also lucky path because I started researching violence in Colombia and trying to understand what was happening there, what was driving people to be so violent. And I saw a lot of the roots of that problem in inequality, in access to services, in access to resources, and also in access to power. From there, I moved to supporting social movements, especially environmental social movement in Bogota. And in that work, I saw a lot of people fighting for their rights, trying to correct wrongs of the government, and trying to make sure that things were really done in the best way. So from that work, I then jumped to working with the government to try to bring those voices in, to try to improve how they receive the participation of citizens and the voices of citizens, and learn a lot from there, especially about the mismatch about how government works and how people think and how people act, and how to try to bridge those differences. And then I was lucky enough to go to the United States and find this job that I really like, working on trying to use evidence and data to address problems that are relevant to people. I would say that's it.
Okay. Like you mentioned, you started your career advising Colombia governments on citizen engagement and social accountability, and now you are using data to solve local problems. So, from the time that you started working in this area, in this sector, what are the existing gaps that still persist in the TPA sector, and how do you think that CSOs and governments can work together to push for transparency and accountability, especially in the grassroots level?
I think there are many gaps, but there are many also good attempts at trying to bridge those gaps or try to close those gaps. But I will highlight three that I think are very important. One is focusing more on the tools that we're trying to use rather than the problems that we're trying to address. So, for instance, advancing solutions in the hopes that then it will enable people to solve problems rather than seeing what the problems are and how people are working to address them and supporting them. The other one I would say is understanding the role of power and politics in the transparency, participation, and accountability space, and how that varies from like talking about the general government and the general political interest, and how that expresses in everyday's lives of the people in government, of the people in civil society, and in the collaboration that they try to work on. And the last one I think is how we build the meaning of this work. How do we build the narratives and the incentives that are driving this work, because we get some pressures from the from the donors, from the global organizations trying to achieve certain indicators, certain different things, while in reality and in the ground things are very messy, and trying to understand how to reinforce the dialogue across those things, the messiness and the conceptual strong strengthness. I think it's something that we need to work a lot more on, and find ways to like get on the same page and try to find common ways to see the world and see the work.
Okay. Can you give me an example? Because I know you've worked in different countries in the global south. Can you give me an example of how you are bringing the solutions to the local communities?
Yep, there are different ways. One is by supporting how people are understanding the problems and designing or devising the ways to address them. And an example of that can be the work that we're doing with the World Bank and OGP, supported by the World Bank and OGP with the Open Data Charter, the Latin American and African Open Data Networks. And basically the work is trying to support some countries as they develop open government partnership commitments to address particular corruption problems. So the work that we have been doing is supporting them, and from that experience, building tools that can enable people in other contexts and in other communities to really understand the problem that they're trying to address, see what strategies might work best or not, and how that is working. And I guess that another good example that I can give you is a project that we are moving right now, and is the COVID-19 transparency, participation, and accountability. Basically, in that project, we're working with people in 7 countries as they try to understand what's happening around the use of public resources to address the COVID-19 emergency, and the and build coalitions and get information so they really can act and really can demand accountability for governments about things that matter in the ground, about whether or not people are receiving the support that they need, the services that they need, or now if they are having equal access to vaccines and other things that are coming up.
Okay. So in looking at different countries that you are working, like in Nigeria, in Mexico, when you look at the work you've done around fiscal transparency, are there areas of similarities and dissimilarities between these regions?
Well, I think that in general, of course, you can find similarities and differences across countries, but I think that it's more useful to think about the similarities and difference in the problems that people are trying to address and the systems where people are working. Because, like, you can say, for instance, we work in Mexico. So in Mexico, you have like a general national thing, but then we work in 7 states, and in each state, we were trying to address problems that were relevant to people. So it meant understanding that the relationships of power around that problem were different, the ways in where people were trying to work were different, and even the context and the kind of political support or the role of civil society were different. And that's something that with our partners in Mexico, GESOC and the National Access to Information Institute, we were able to find and try to identify ways to work with the people to understand issues, and from there come with solutions that use global tools and global, for instance, data standards, but were tailored to the local context where they were working. So basically, that's the point. I think that it's better or more useful for us as the transparency, participation, and accountability community to understand what are those similarities and differences in how we are approaching problems, how we are understanding problems, and how we can find ways to navigate those problems rather than just thinking about the contexts and whether or not those are similar or different.
Okay. Which brings me to my next question, which is when you look at fiscal governance globally across different regions, what is that persistent problem that when you look at country A, you find the same problem. When you look at country B, you find that this same problem also exists. What are those challenges, those key challenges that persist?
As I say, I think that they vary a lot. They might have similarities, but they vary a lot. Like
Mhm.
in one country, you can say, or in 2 countries, you can say that there is no access to information. In
Mhm.
one, it might be because they don't have the technical capacities. In other one might be because there is no political will. But for instance, you can see similar ways to address the problems, or yeah, somehow similar ways to address the problem. For instance, our partners in Nigeria, PPDC, the Public-Private Development Center, they started trying to get information to government so they could use the open contracting data standard to present it in a similar way and then demand accountability based on that. But then you have that was at the national and national level. But then you have experiences like other partners that we had in Mexico that are Caregua, which are basically trying to use access to information to get information from government at the municipal level. And now they're building a network of municipal organizations doing that kind of work, building on the kind of standard of publishing information that is based on law. So you can see that there are different ways, different things, but there are similarities in the approaches, the tools that they use, and the way that they try to navigate politics. So, yeah.
Thank you for explaining all that in details, George. So let me take you back to where you first started working, where the younger version of George. So looking back to where you started and to where you are now, if you were to advise yourself when you were starting out in this field, what would you advise yourself? Or this advice might also be to someone who has the same passion as you on championing transparency and accountability and civic participation issues.
I will say that the best advice is related to a saying in my country and in my mother tongue, which is nadie sabe la sed con la que otro bebe, which roughly translates to uh, nobody knows how thirsty the other one is when he's drinking. So really getting a lot of experience, like even more experience and more knowledge about how to listen to people, integrate those things, and bring that voice into really decisions and making decisions with them. That's something that I do a lot now in global integrity, but it's something that for sure anybody that works at this needs to really know how to do, and to know that it's not about making the best thing, but it's about listening to people and trying to come up with the more interesting and useful solutions for the problems in the ground.
Mhm. Thank you so much for your time, George. So my takeaway from our conversation, at least one of it, is listening, the importance of listening to the people we are offering this service to. Thank you so much for your time, George.
And I will say that more than listening is like listen, but also share the capacity to make decisions. It's not just hearing what they need and thinking about how to solve it, but working with the people to develop the ways to solve or address those issues.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, George.
Thank you.